From the WiseFoodStorage.com studios, where gourmet emergency meals are at the best price, WiseFoodStorage.com. It's a pleasure to welcome Thomas Woods, economist, economic thinker. You know, he has degrees from Harvard and Columbia, but what I find most impressive is he lives with 5 females. That, sir, is commendable. In fact, that's why he agreed to come on the show. His first question was, is it Dennis or Denise?
Well, thanks for having me. In fact, we had 3 girls under 3 for a while, so it's even more astonishing than it sounds.
So are you pampered? Is the result of all of that a pampering of daddy?
Well, I just had a very nice Father's Day, so far so good. All our girls are age 8 and under, and I tell everybody, so far so good. I don't see what the big problem about girls is, and they all roll their eyes saying, wait till they turn 14.
That's right. I'll have you on then. In fact, you will ask to come on then.
6 years from now, we'll make it a day.
That's right, exactly. Thomas Woods, as written, this is your 12th book or 11th?
11th.
He does keep count. It's okay. I'm just ribbing you because I keep count of the countries I visited, and I have no shame in saying I went to 100.
I'm just doing the U.S. states. I'm up to 45.
What have you missed?
The big ones: Alaska, Hawaii, and then Wyoming, Oregon, and South Dakota.
Well, I want you to know, my producer can verify this. My 50th state was North Dakota a few years ago. When we drove into it from South Dakota, I got out, and like Pope John Paul II, may he rest in peace, I kissed the ground. My 50th state.
That is fantastic.
Yes. All right, my friend. Your book is Rollback, Repealing Big Government Before the Coming Fiscal Collapse. Now, I am very skeptical, whether it's right or left, of an apocalyptic scenario. So tell me, is your subtitle over the top or for real?
Well, I'm not one of these perma-bears, who sees disaster around the corner every 10 seconds. So I think that lends a little extra credibility to what I'm saying. I'm not predicting, another financial crisis, although there may well be. I'm predicting something that I think really doesn't require prediction. I'm predicting that the budget trends we have are just totally unsustainable. I mean, when we add in the off-budget considerations of Social Security and Medicare, those unfunded liabilities are greater than twice the GDP of the entire world. So that's not a question of I'm just being pessimistic. That's a matter of just looking at reality, and that what we're facing is a combination of that with the added problem that with all these deficits, by 2020, let's assume the best scenario. Let's assume we've had a robust recovery from the malaise we're in now, and let's assume interest rates stay really low. By 2020, even the government's own numbers, which are always rosy, tell us that it's going to be costing $1 trillion a year just to pay the interest on the national debt, and that's in the best scenario, which I don't consider likely. So in other words, for people who have thought for years and years that, deficits don't really matter, a lot of people are worried, but I haven't seen any real consequences from them. Well, now we're about to find out. Now we're actually going to see those consequences.
In a conservative way, I don't mean politically, but in a conservative sense, how far is America from Greece?
I don't know, maybe 20 years or less. I would answer it almost in a time frame, because now Greece has a much worse kind of welfare mentality than Americans do. I mean, the things that they riot over are just astonishing. They expect to be able to retire in their early 50s. I know people from Greece, and they tell me people have the view that more or less things are to be handed to them, and if this situation changes, they don't know. They've forgotten how to live their lives, frankly, without the types of impossible promises that the government has made to them. And given that our big problem is going to be the demographic crisis we're facing, which is a fancy way of saying that our population is aging very quickly. That is to say, in our lifetimes, we're going to see the number of people in America aged 100 and over increase by 13 times. Now, I am not saying it's bad for people to live longer, but when we haven't made any provision for this, that is a big problem. We are going to be facing a situation where we won't have to argue about the need to cut government spending anymore. That's going to be a done deal, because when it comes down to either we get rid of the Federal Department of Education or we unplug your grandmother, I think grandma's going to be safe in that calculus.
Why, by the way, I'm so glad you raised that, because that's actually the first thing I answer when callers ask me where I would start cutting government funding, and I say the Department of Education. Why are Republicans loath to raise that issue?
Because they've allowed themselves to be persuaded that if they're against the Federal Department of Education, that makes them anti-education. And one of the points I point out in Rollback is that when they started the Department of Education under Jimmy Carter, which, by the way, I think we had educated people before the days of Jimmy Carter, but when that was started then, even the Washington Post editorialized against it. The New York Times did.
Really? I did not know that.
The American Federation of Teachers said it would just be another layer of bureaucracy. So isn't this funny, Dennis, how the allowable range of debate has changed? In 1979, you could be against this and be on the left. Today, conservatives are afraid to be against it.
Well, all one has to do is show a graph.
Yeah.
Expenditures and
test
results. That's
right.
all. And you have a large V, a V on its side. One bar going up and one bar going down.
And by
the way, what do we spend? Do you know offhand what we do spend?
It's fluctuated around $80 billion, but I think it's up higher than that now. But I mean, it's basically money you're spending for the privilege of being told how to run your school. I mean, I think it's an insult to Americans to have it. But this is a typical story of all kinds of government programs that, I mean, imagine if the numbers were reversed. Imagine if we had spent all this money on the Department of Education and test scores went up. Well, we'd never hear the end of it. Well, this just goes to show you stupid Neanderthals that government spending increases the test scores. Right. But when it's the opposite, we hear crickets. We hear nothing at all.
That's exactly right. What do you think of Paul Ryan's proposals?
I think too vague, too little, too late, basically. I mean, I know a lot of people think Newt Gingrich thinks he's too extreme. I say not extreme enough. Because my view is I don't care that you're going to give me a balanced budget in the year 2040. I mean, how stupid do I look? I mean, how many times have we had 10-plus year plans ever be actually faithfully carried out? I mean, I want to know, what do you intend to do this year? What's your one-year budget proposal? I don't want to know what they're going to... I mean, his proposal would basically add trillions and trillions to the debt over the next 10 years. I don't think we've got that kind of time to be playing these games. I think we've got to be really genuinely honest with the American people. And when the editor of Slate comes out and says, I like the Ryan plan, that makes me skeptical.
We'll be back in a moment with Thomas Woods of the Ludwig von Mises Institute, where he is... What is the official title? Is it Senior Fellow? And yes, that is Senior Fellow. The book, Rollback, Repealing Big Government Before the Coming Fiscal Collapse. He is a libertarian. I'm going to raise some issues that I do have with libertarianism when we come back. The book again, Rollback, very clear thinker, Thomas Woods, and the book is up at DennisPrager.com. It's you, your PC, and yours truly, Dennis Prager, gathering here at the Conservative Outpost on the Internet, Town Hall Radio.
At SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. Walmart says today's Supreme Court ruling blocking a massive sex discrimination suit against the retail giant makes one thing clear. The claims didn't come close to showing a company-wide policy that discriminated against women in pay and promotions. The Supreme Court is refusing to require states to provide lawyers for poor people in civil cases that might send them to jail. The Democratic National Committee raised $10.5 million in May, outpacing its Republican counterpart for the month and generating more money for a joint fundraising account with the Obama campaign. On Wall Street, the Dow is up about 70 points at 12,074. The Nasdaq Composite Index better by 15, and the S&P 500 Index is trading 7 points higher. More details at srnnews.com.
Dennis Prager here, reminding you to visit Blinds.com, which I have visited and used, and their blinds are in many of the rooms of my home. Blinds.com, the best prices, truly best prices. My guest is Thomas Woods, the libertarian economist and a man of clarity, and he is a senior fellow at the Ludwig von Mises Institute. Where is that institute, by the way?
It's in Auburn, Alabama, safely far away from Washington, D.C.
You would think that more people would do that, would actually leave the Northeast and see that there is another part of the country. It's to its credit that it's located in Auburn, by the way.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, we got great college football. We have free parking in our lot for that. But I mean, really, the idea is that you're in Washington forever. It just harms you spiritually to hang around there. And this way, no lobbyist shows up, no corporation asks us to write a study that'll get them the law passed that they want. We can just do our work in peace.
You said earlier, and I think it needs to be repeated, that within 8 or 9 years we will have a $1 trillion interest on the debt?
In the best scenario, yes.
I think I just wanted to underscore that for my listeners, how unsustainable that is. We are in an unsustainable direction. And when you read Paul Krugman, if you do, the economics columnist for the New York Times and professor of economics at Princeton, when you read his prescription, which each week is just restated in different words, we need to have another stimulus, spend another $1 trillion, and that will fix it, because then people will get jobs, the people will spend money, and the money will therefore translate into jobs. How do you react?
Well, I mean, at one level, it's one of these interesting characters where he's not stupid, so it's not that it's the guy can't read or understand simple concepts, but his whole worldview is so warped that he just can't break out of it, even if he wanted to. Some of my friends pretty much have dedicated their lives to refuting his every column. But the problem with him, of course, is that you can never refute him, in the sense that if you say, look, Paul Krugman, in Japan they pretty much did what you wanted. I mean, you had an incredible amount of stimulus spending there. I mean, maybe a dozen stimulus packages, hundreds of trillions of yen blown, so that Japan is the most heavily indebted country in the developed world. I mean, you would think that would be sufficient spending. But his view is they just didn't spend enough. So, at what point do you say, well, maybe the whole way of thinking is flawed? He can't. It's always we didn't do enough. It's never that maybe this whole strategy was wrong and childish and juvenile to start with.
Let me ask you. I've been meaning to ask some economists that I respected this question. Could Franklin Roosevelt have foreseen the crisis that the welfare state is now in?
I don't know if he could have foreseen it. I don't know if he was thinking that far ahead. I do.
All right,
know,
let's go on. I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, I was going to say I do know that he said once that that no, I won't say a bad word, no darn politician will ever be able to scrap my Social Security program or whatever because of the way he worded it and the way he pitched it to the public, that they believe that this is really their money that's being carefully guarded for them by the government and wisely invested. And he encouraged people to believe in a lot of myths that turned out to be false. But I don't think he looked particularly far ahead. I think he looked ahead about 10 years.
What American or Americans at that time did say this will ultimately collapse?